Hello and welcome to another Thinking Particles 7.3 tutorial video. In this video I will show you how to use MiEL even though you are not a programmer or scripter. And that's the great thing about MiEL. The nodes you create with it are exactly the same like any other node in Thinking Particles. Maybe you only have to tweak a little bit, a few variables, but that's all possible and doable. So let me show you what I mean and let's dive right into the scene. This scene is made up of pretty simple objects. We have a table and some objects on the table. We have a Thinking Particles, and let's check out the Thinking Particles right away. So the Thinking Particles has a particle drawer, so where we draw three particles here. That's our spores. They go into the spore particle group, as we can see up here. And the next dynamic set we have here is our MiEL. I won't go too deep with the MiEL code because we are not interested in the code. We are not scripters, so we just want to use it and see what it does. So we can see there's some standard Thinking Particles nodes like the memory operator, which we know, the collision object or an object collector node that just collects objects from the scene. We have the box, teapot, torus, and table. And we have a text map node as well that just supplies a checker texture map. So the texture map is on the torus, we can see that, and it's called fungicide. So let's see what this does. Let me just play back the simulation. And this is a real live growing simulation of a slime mold. And we can see it grows across objects, it tries to bridge objects. And we also have a surface down here, a surface dynamic set where we have an OpenVDB surface. And that's a great thing. Let me just go to the master dynamic set and let me show the mesh, and I'll just remove the particles. So now what we get here is our slime mold, our volumes, so to say, that shows us our slime mold. And we have several parameters when we go into the mycelium setup. When you click the MiEL, you have this editor thing where you have the code. As I told you, it's a pretty complex code that simulates live growing of fungi, but we don't have to care about that. We have these important parameters. So the scripter gave us all these parameters we can adjust in real time. So for example, I can adjust the total length this thing can grow. So now I have reduced the length, and we will see it will stop at this 200 millimeter length and won't grow beyond that. So that's a great thing to do. We can control in detail what we want to achieve and how we want to create these kind of effects. Let me just go back and turn the mesh off and go back to sprites. And we can see the growing much faster. And we see here our growing is not that far anymore, doesn't cover the whole table or will not cover the whole table, and we have all this growing going on. So that's the great thing we have here with MiEL. Even though I don't know the code and I'm freaking out when I see code, oh, I don't want to touch it. No, you don't have to. You can use all the exposed parameters, and we have a lot of samples where you can just use them. And I suggest we just do that. Let's use this grow algorithm and cover some other objects from your scenes maybe. So let's start from scratch. So I'm going to load a new scene here, and then we will see how we can apply that. Let me just find and load the scene now. Here we have our scene, and in this scene, same deal. Let's check. We have two objects, the full skull and the table. So here we have the skull, and I want to grow a little bit of slime mold across the skull. So let's do that. How would we do that? We go into Thinking Particles, we create our Thinking Particles. Doesn't matter where we place our helper object. And I'll bring up the Thinking Particles user interface. One thing for sure is we need to create some spores. And I'll create the spores the same way like we did it in the other. I'll just draw them because that gives me more control. So I'll just draw the spores. And with the particle draw, we need to know that the particle draw doesn't set any size, or it always uses 1 as the default. And I don't want that in the scene because I know the scale of the scene. So I'll just set the size right away when we draw these particles. The next thing I want to do is, let me just rename that to create, just to keep it in nice and tidy. And now I'm going to load our MiEL dynamic set. So that's just a standard thinkingParticles black box. We can load and save black boxes as we want. And it's loading my fungus simulation setup in here. So once more, I have no idea about scripting and what all this does. The only thing I care about is the TP nodes I know. For example, the object collector. And I can see, okay, the object that it initially had was still in there, it was deleted. So I'll just start adding my objects again. I'll have the table and I have the skull. And here we have a texture map. We need to explore that later. And we have the memory operator. That's all fine. So now back to creating my initial spores so the slime mold can start growing. And I'll do that with a particle draw, as I said before. And I'm going to use the Max Painter. And we need to make sure we are creating this in the spore particle group. And then we are just going to start painting our particle seeds here, or spores. Let me put one here and put one here. So I think that's fine. Let's start with that and have a look. So I can see we have the ticks now. I don't like this as a display option. I'll go to sprites. And maybe I want to make the sprites a little bit bigger so that we can actually trace or see where our growing happens. And we can see the skull is growing. However, excuse me. However, for the scene, I want the mold to grow, the slime mold to grow also on the table. And right now it isn't doing it. So it could be that we, just by pure chance, the slime mold doesn't like it on the table and it just replicates on the skull. But I can see it's going down here, but not skipping to the table. And as we remember, there was this texture map, the fungicide texture, and that's our gradient ramp. And right now we would need to explore what this means. Let me just move that over here, and I'll just drag and drop the texture map over here. So that's the texture map. That's very interesting. So as before, black means it's not growing, white means it's growing. So because the scene is new, we didn't apply any textures or anything. So it's still the default texture map. So I'll just apply this material here. And for this material, I'll just drag and drop the texture map in here. So, and we can see right now the whole table is black, and that would mean everything is killed, nothing is allowed to grow. And that's probably because we don't have any, how's it called? We don't have any mapping or materials on our object. So let's, materials is on the object, but now let's see about mapping. Let me just do a simple UV map. And I'll just align that with the normal align function. Here we go. Let me just scale our texture map a little bit. Let me just go to standard here. Let me just scale it down a little bit in all axes, so something like that. We still can't see it, so why would that be? There are several options and possibilities why this doesn't work. The main reason is we could look into the editor where we use this texture map. We know the text map is called fungicide, so we would just search for fungi and let's see if we can find it somewhere else. And here we have fungicide texture map, and I can see point UVW is the number 2. That means if I look up the syntax, I can just press this button here. That will bring me the user interface, and it tells me the UV channel, in UV channel. So I know, aha, that's UV channel. Okay, that should be easy to solve. We just go to UV channel 2 and there we go. It's just our mapping channel. And now let me just move our gizmo a little bit around so that we have our spores growing in kind of this direction. Maybe I want to rotate it a little bit, something like that. So all in these white areas we will allow a grow. Outside there will be no growth at all. So let me just bring back, and we don't need the material on the object, so we can just put another material there because we have, let me just show you again, we have in our thinking particles, let me just click that, thinking particles properties, we have the text map in here. So thinking particles is grabbing the text map. It doesn't matter which material we put on our object because thinking particles will evaluate this texture map based on the mapping channel. So that's all what we need. And now let's have a look if it actually works as we expected. So we have the growing of mold growing going on here. And let's see if we can jump to our table, and yes, we jump to our table and the mold grows now on our table, and it actually grows in the pattern where we allow it to grow. So we had this black area and this white noisy area here, so the mold will only grow in those areas where we allow it. So now you have seen, just by using an existing MiEL node, we can apply it to any other scene, and we don't have to be a scripter at all to use that. And we have all these controls for our mold growing or slime mold growing functions here. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a lot about how to use MiEL. And let me just turn on our surface as well here as a last step so that we can actually see our surface. And let me just see, here we go. There we have our surface, and our skull is all over with slime mold. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed that. See you next time. Goodbye.